Hi there. Didn't hear you come in. I have to apologize. Today I've got a bit of a cold that I'm fighting off, and so I'm a little congested and may sound a little different, but hopefully that won't be too distracting. Well, as most of you probably know, as well as making YouTube videos, I'm a nature photographer by profession. For the last 20 years, I've been photographing Rocky Mountain National Park, and I have a gallery in Estes Park, as well as a small one in New Mexico where I show my Desert Southwest work. And so today I thought I would share with you some of the photos I made in Rocky Mountain National Park during 2023 and give you a little bit of what was going on behind them. Now, these are not going to be maybe the most dramatic photos or the most compelling or the best-selling or even the ones that you prefer. I made hundreds of photos this past year, and the ones I want to share with you today are ones that are important to me, mostly because they have some little backstory to them, or I guess most of them were actually like gifts. They weren't something that I worked so hard to make happen, but rather things that were just sort of presented to me. So let me walk you through a few of the fun photos that I made during 2023. This first photo is from January 2nd. Now, a freezing fog rolled through the park in the night, and so that next morning all the trees were coated in just a beautiful shimmering layer of ice. It made each branch and needle feel like they were decorated in crystals, and it seemed like no matter where I turned my lens, there seemed to be something of real beauty to photograph. And I stayed out for quite a few hours, mostly in the Beaver Meadows area, photographing pine cones and needles and trees, and there was just that freezing fog was just hanging on, and I stayed until it started to fade. And it was just one of those really special mornings where simple scenes were transformed into something magical, and it's always fun to see that of places I know so well. So that was the first one. That was back in January 2nd. Now, in early February, following a large snowstorm, I headed up into the park dark and early, as I often do, and I had this particular scene I wanted to photograph. But to get to my location, I was going to have to ski past Dream Lake. However, when I reached the Dream Lake area, it was still dark. I gasped because there was a nearly full moon setting right between Hallett Peak and Flat Top Mountain, and the light of the moon was so bright that it even caused the fluffy snow to sparkle. It was probably the most magical scene I saw in the entire year. I just stood there with my jaw dropped, realizing how perfect everything was in this scene. And even as I was taking the photo, I started to think about, oh yeah, this one might be the photo that I use on my new hardcover book. And so that was the case. Later in the year, I chose this photo to be the cover of my Wildlight coffee table book, which came out in September. It was such a special morning. Now, I think that I probably skied up Flat Top Mountain once a week last winter. I mostly headed up to a few areas above treeline that had some good skiing rather than always heading up to the actual summit. I found it was a nice workout after a long day in the office and usually provided me with an exhilarating ski run back down to Bear Lake. Well, a number of times I headed up after a snowstorm. And I remember one time where the snow was knee-deep at Bear Lake, waist-deep once I reached treeline, and then as I tried to ski back down, I got stuck with snow up to my shoulders. I think it took me 10 minutes to get free. That was a little bit scary. But yeah, I went up to that area quite a lot, often after a snowstorm. On a couple of occasions, I got there just as the clouds were breaking and all the trees at treeline were coated in the thick layer of snow and ice, and it just had this magical feeling as that Colorado bluebird sky began to open up above the peak and the clouds began to dissipate. And when I look at this particular photo, I'm just reminded of all of those times being up there at treeline last winter as the storms began to break. And I feel like this photo captured my experience of being up there in that winter wonderland. Now, I kept going up there most of last winter, and I remember in April I was skiing up above tree line on Flat Top, and I spotted a ptarmigan in the distance. This is a small bird that needs cold temperatures to survive, and it's kind of like the penguin of Rocky Mountain National Park, and it lives way up high, and it's threatened currently by the changing climate. But I saw this ptarmigan running across, as I often do, and because it's illegal to approach wildlife, I just do what I always do and stand back and watch from where I'm at, but I try and have my camera ready just in case. But what was interesting is that this ptarmigan was curious, and so he ran up to see what I was doing in his neighborhood, and he jumped on top of a snow-covered rock right near me and began looking at me, allowing me to make a number of different photos of him. He stuck around for about 5 minutes or so, and this was not something I could ever have planned, but again was just simply a gift. Being in the presence of another wild creature in this very desolate location, I don't know, it just warmed something inside of me to share in an experience of us checking each other out and recognizing each other as living beings on this blue ball. Well, this next photo was taken early June, and I was walking in an area that I had been to, I don't know, hundreds of times. But for some reason, this time I noticed a series of aspen trunks growing right next to each other, creating this fascinating pattern. And so what I did was I used a very long camera lens which compressed the image and made all the trees feel like they were together. And it created a very abstract looking image that kind of plays with your head. As you look at it, it's sometimes hard to tell which tree is in front and which is behind. And that's after you start to figure out what you're even looking at. But I don't know, there's something about seeing this and being able to show a different side of the beautiful aspen trees that is often missed. We often look at the leaves or the long slender trunks, but there's also such beauty in these intricately scarred trunks here and the abstract shapes that creates. I remember one morning I was going out to photograph a particular location about 5 miles back, and on the way I pass a aspen grove. It's a rather interesting aspen grove because it's located in a deep pine forest. I oftentimes try to photograph them, but it's usually not a very conducive to making photographs. But on this morning, this last summer in June, we'd had so much snow in the winter, followed by a very wet and rainy spring. And so when I arrived at that spot, there was a pond that had never been there before, and I went up to have a look, and here were these fresh green aspen leaves that had just come out a day or two before, reflecting in this pond, and a gentle breeze was blowing over the water, and it created this painterly feel. I mean, it was just gorgeous. I took a number of photographs. In fact, I probably spent an hour there just delighting in that particular scene. Soon after I took this picture, maybe the next day or so, I came down with really extreme fatigue, and I wasn't able to do much of anything for over a month. I'd had bouts of fatigue during the previous 6 months where I couldn't get out of bed for a day or two, and it's been something of a mystery, and I'd been to the doctors and we went through lots of different tests. And everything seems to be okay, but they kind of think maybe it could have something to do with a tick bite that I'd had the previous autumn and that I was suffering the effects of that. We don't know, but anyways, just after taking this picture of this aspen grove, I was knocked out for over 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, and that really is my prime photography period for the entire year. I block it out. I tell my staff and my family, don't expect to see me around. I'm going to be in the backcountry photographing because that's my favorite time to photograph, when you still have all the snow on the peaks and the lakes are beginning to open up and things are beginning to turn green. But this year, I spent almost the entire period in bed trying to do office work. It was a difficult time. But fortunately, around the end of July, just overnight, I started to feel better. And I actually had a camping trip with a friend planned for that time. So I joined him. I didn't know how well I would do, but I seemed to do okay. And on our first morning, we were camping in the south part of Rocky Mountain National Park. And we got up dark and early, I don't know, 4 o'clock or something, and just headed into the deep woods, crawling over fallen trees and making our way higher and higher to reach a particular spot for sunrise. We got up above tree line and there were clouds near the horizon, and I thought, no, we're not going to have anything this morning. But somehow that sun found a crack in the clouds and it just lit up and it glowed on the stream in front of me. And something inside of me just kind of leapt. I think having been cooped up for over a month, I just felt so alive. I felt like I was coming back to life, and it was just such an amazing experience being up there. And so every time I look at this picture, I think back to that experience of coming back out again into the wilderness and the beautiful way that I was received with such a wonderful light. So yeah, for me, that was a really special one. I know it was a hard period, and so coming out of that really felt pretty amazing. So this next photo I want to share with you is probably one of my least professional of all the photos I'm showing you. And the reason I've chosen is because it's kind of special to me. This summer, after I got better, I went back to work on a number of projects that I have. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm slowly climbing all of the official and unofficial peaks of Rocky Mountain National Park. I've been all over the park and down below them and up just about every stream and lake and area of the park, but I haven't necessarily stood on the summits of every mountain. And in truth, most mountains, it's just not that attractive for a photographer to stand up there. The views from there are not actually that photogenic. On this hike, I went up Mount Baker in the Never Summer Range and then up Mount Stratus and Mount Nimbus. On my way up, I stopped at Mount Stratus and I looked back and had this beautiful view of Mount Baker in the background. It just looks so jagged and rugged. I feel like this picture, even though it's not perfect, it communicates something of what I feel when I'm up there. That sense of drama, that ruggedness of the Never Summer Mountains. So for me, this is a picture that just brings back a lot of great memories. I just thought I'd share it with you because it's a beautiful part of the park and a beautiful view that most people don't get to see because not that many people actually go up there. This next one I'm going to show you is just from a special morning. I woke dark and early again, went outside and saw that there was thick fog everywhere, and I thought this could be a good thing, and I thought it could possibly be an inversion. When it's really dark, it's sometimes hard to know, but I jumped in my vehicle and drove up Trail Ridge Road and tried to find that place where the clouds gave way to blue sky. So I drove up, and sure enough, up above Rainbow Curve, this cloud started to give way. And so I went to one of my little favorite spots and watched as the clouds came up and came down. Oftentimes I get nothing during those times because the clouds swallow me up. But this time the clouds descended a little bit just as the sun started to rise, and I had all of this lovely Krumholtz around me, this hill in the background that looked like an island floating on an ocean of clouds. And the whole scene just kind of came together, and you can see how wet the road is and the pool of water on that stone, and you just get that whole story of what was going on there, that storm had come through and now it was clearing up, and it was just really kind of magical the way everything came together for me that day. I was very happy. We have just one photo left, and this one was taken in September of this year, and this is of an aspen grove in Rocky Mountain National Park. And if truth be told, I really struggle quite a bit in the autumn to make new photographs because we only have a limited number of aspen groves in the park, and I know all of them quite well and have made photos in most of them. So coming up with something new is always a little bit of a challenge. But this year we had so much rain in the summer that it left the streams running quite quickly. And on this particular day, I hiked up a stream, following it up, and I knew there were aspen along the way. And I came across this scene, and it was just so delightful. The aspen were at peak color. There was a bright orange willow on the other side, and then this stream had this beautiful form as it moved through the scene. And I was mesmerized. I spent probably an hour here just soaking in the vibe of this little spot tucked into the woods. Though I did have to plant myself rather precariously on this boulder to try and get this perspective, but the scene itself was really lovely, and for me it just felt like a surprise to find something new to photograph here in Rocky during the autumn that I hadn't done before. I'd been to this spot many times, but conditions had never been like this, and so I was just delighted by it. Well, all in all, 2023 was actually a very good year. There is so much that I am thankful for. I got to see so many beautiful sights and hike into so many beautiful places this year. Life is good despite the challenges that often confront us. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of those photos and hearing a little bit of their backstory. You can see hundreds more of my photos by visiting my various websites or my Facebook page, and I'll just put all the links down below, and you can go ahead and follow those and find them for yourself. On January 1st, I plan to release another video, and this one is going to look back at 20 years in Rocky Mountain National Park, and I'm going to tell a little bit of my background of how I got here and a little bit about where I'm going with this YouTube channel. I'm sure many of you were kind of wondering, why is he doing these funny videos? It doesn't make any sense. But I'll explain maybe a little bit more about where I'm going and what you can expect from this channel, so look for that on January 1st. Well, thanks again for watching, everyone. I sure appreciate all of you. Best wishes, and we will see you in 2024. If you would like to learn more about Rocky Mountain National Park, visit my website, RockyMountainNationalPark.com. For my books and calendar, visit RockyTrailPress.com. And if you're visiting Estes Park, Colorado, be sure and stop in my gallery, Images of RM and P.